Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to SkepTalk. We're on the line. The phone lines are open. We are here to take your calls, science questions, arguing about God, a little bit of mix of the two. We're here. For those of you new here, I'm Aaron, and this cool guy in the shades is Aron. If you get the two names confused, you will be punished.
About damn time.
All right. It's also worth noting today is September 30th. We are just a matter of hours away from spooky time. Aron, have you prepared for the good horror season?
Well, I'm always ready for that, but I don't do holidays anymore. This is just kind of my year round. Yeah. Although, I did some preparation.
Ah.
I got a pumpkin stout of 12 ABV.
I did not prepare proper, but I'll be getting either appropriate beer or at least something with pumpkin spice in the very near future.
All right, so do we have any... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so just a few quick announcements. So tonight, this is SkepTalk. We have, of course, many other shows here on the line. Now, a few of our upcoming hosts are not yet scheduled, but tomorrow night we have Chewed Gum. That will be with Eve Was Framed and Alyssa Ljub. On Wednesday, we got The Hang Up with Matt Dillahunty. Thursday, we got the Transatlantic Call Show. That's going to be with Arden and Ben. And of course, Sunday, we got our two shows, the Sunday Show and Sunday After Dark. Who's going to be there? We are still trying to figure that out. It'll be a mystery. And of course, next Monday, same time, we got SkepTalk again with the upcoming host to be determined. But now for tonight, this is your time to call in. Got science-related questions? Want to argue about God somehow? We are here for it. Aron, do you have other announcements to make?
No. I'm just always up for the argument, and I find increasingly that our interlocutors are not. So I saw that Eric Hovind, the Lesser Hovind, posted some video that you can't defend evolution unless you defend Big Bang cosmology, and then because for whatever reason they're linked. He thinks somehow because evolution is naturalism, and that means Big Bang has to be strawmanned as everything from nothing, which of course is what he believes, and not what I hold to be true, nor any atheist that I know. I don't know anybody who believes everything came from nothing. Not even Lawrence Krauss believes everything came from nothing. Nor is it relevant whether the Big Bang happened at all, and whether the universe had a beginning, whether it was something other than what we might call the Big Bang right now, because there are some people that hold to to different concepts of cosmology without cosmogony. And it doesn't matter to me either way, whether the universe began or it didn't, or however that happened, does not change the fact that we are evolving apes, and that all of the scriptures, all of them for every religion, are just man-made mythology with no truth in it. That's it.
And all the crazier when they say that the modern Christian will say that the universe was created from nothing, because not even the book supports that. Because you go right back to Genesis, and it basically says, oh yeah, there's all this water already around before God started doing anything. So it's like, what did God start with? Apparently something.
Yeah. There's a number of ways to read that. I mean, like when it says that, that God created the heaven and the earth. I've got to promote a friend of mine, Lawrence Yufa, did a 2-year project researching whether biblical authors believed that the earth was flat. And he has an 1.5 hour long video where he does all these citations, not just within the Bible, but also prior to the Bible, from Enuma Elish and a number of other Mesopotamian scripts that all share parallels in their descriptions, where they're all describing a flat earth cosmology, universally, consistently, always. And when they're talking about spreading out the heavens, no, they are not talking about cosmic inflation They're talking about spreading out the heavens like a tent, like a garment over the firmament of the earth. And what is the firmament? It is a solid structure, according to the Bible, that is that it rises out of the it rises out of the edges of the earth, which is sometimes depicted as mountains, but originally it rose out of the sea. And the firmament is a solid structure that's made to look like molten glass or mirrored glass. And it's something that God hammered out and shaped so that he could keep the waters above the firmament and the air below the firmament. So he's basically making the earth as a reverse snow globe. And the earth is erected on pillars so that it will not move, so that everything the Bible says about the earth in relation to the rest of the cosmos is laughably wrong. But my friend Lawrence Yufa did a beautiful video about that, and everybody should go see it. I mean, it's an hour and a half long, but he covers all the shit. So anytime somebody wants to bring up, well, Isaiah 40:22, he sits above the circle of the earth, and that means that it's a sphere. No, it doesn't. Yep, go read the fucking thing again. So when God starts with, that created the heavens and the earth, we start with an image that there's the water above the firmament and the water below the firmament, which he hasn't divided yet, right? So he's just got there's a place of being, and which hasn't taken shape yet. And interestingly, the first thing that comes about is light, right? And right at the beginning, it says that only the Spirit of God moved over the face of the waters, which means God is spirit. The word for spirit, over and over again, we see that there's a correlation between spirit and wind, or the movement of air. And people thought that the reason people thought that they had souls was because we breathe, and we know that if you stop breathing, you will die. So it's the movement of air that keeps you animated. It's the animating spirit. It's your vitalism. So the Spirit of God moves over the face of the waters. Dust devils were literally devils. They see clouds and all this moving around in the sky. Ifrits, the idea of genies, they're dust devils. The idea of Ifrit, so when you have a powerful fire, it goes into a vortex. Same kind of thing. Volcanoes produce all this smoke, and so this is the spiritual world that these ancient people understood. So the first thing that happens with this creation, we already have a world. It hasn't taken shape yet, but we have light, so we can begin to see some things, but we haven't been able to work out what those things are. And as the story progresses, you are able to make out details in the plants and the mountains and the division between the earth and sea, and now we can tell where the water ends, where the land begins, all of that. And then 4 stages into the story, we finally have the dawn. Just like if you've ever sat up all night or got up really early, you have seen that the sky lights up before you see the sun. And then by the time the sun comes up, well, now by then you're able to see everything. All right, so that's one of the other interpretations. But it's all symbolic. It was never supposed to be historically literal. The people who wrote it didn't think that they were writing God's truth. Obviously, God didn't have that impression either.
As a anecdote to that, just because it's something I've been recently studying as well. So the creation count that you have at the beginning of Genesis, that is usually attributed to the priestly or the P source from the Pentateuch. And that's the same author from Exodus 14 of the parting of the Red Seas. And there's actually a lot of common language between the separating of the heavens and the earth and the separating of the waters at the Red Sea story. So it seems like the author of that was just like, I already wrote this story. This will work here too.
Okay. Yeah, for everybody that was telling about this video, you look it up on Milwaukee Atheist, the Milwaukee Atheist channel. It's not under Lawrence's name; it's under the Milwaukee Atheist channel, and that's where he has the videos. Whether the flat Earth is biblical.
All right, I'll have to check that out. I actually did a stream with Joshua Bowen and Kip Davis a year, maybe 2 years ago, on the same sort of topic as well. Of course, Josh and Kip are the actual experts in ancient Akkadian and Hebrew texts. I basically came along and said, I want to pretend like I know something too. But also pointed out, hey, you know what? The Chinese were flat earthers until the 17th century.
I think it's interesting that people would always tell me my whole life that that science always thought that the world was flat. until an uneducated Christian proved them wrong, and they were talking about Columbus.
Mm.
And I have to point out that no, the whole world knew that the Earth was a sphere before Columbus didn't prove anything, because everybody knew that the Earth was a sphere already before Columbus did his trip. What was interesting is when the book of Daniel and a couple of other Bible books described the Earth as flat after science had determined that it was a sphere, after Eratosthenes, for example.
Yeah. I found that, in the medieval period, in medieval Europe, they knew the Earth was round. They also had that book that kind of made it seem so flat, so they tried to find the roundest flat Earth they could make up. So basically, the roundness of the Earth is this giant sphere of water. There's basically just this island at the top of that giant sphere of water, which is much bigger than the land itself. So that way you have the circle of the Earth in the giant sphere of water. And that only finally was then undone with Columbus's trip. So Columbus didn't prove that the Earth was round, but he proved which kind of round Earth it was to those folks. And as I mentioned, like the Chinese until the 17th century were flat earthers, until basically European scientists folks came over and said, hey, we can do better astronomy than you guys. And eventually, the folks there were like, yeah, you can predict eclipses better than our astronomers by a long shot. We're going to hire you guys. Oh, you have a completely different cosmology? Well, if it works, I guess we'll take it.
Yeah. Flat earthers have a hell of a time predicting, eclipses, because those are not supposed to happen at all. That's a so sad thing.
Well, when there is an eclipse, it's all a conspiracy.
The Quran is definitely written from a flat Earth perspective too. They're using the flat Earth cosmology, and it's dripping all the way through the Quran. It was just one thing I couldn't get over. When it says that that the sun sets in a muddy pond, and that the sun can't move to the other side of the earth to rise again without God's permission. There's just a bunch of absurdity in that book. And when it starts talking about what the stars are, I mean, the Bible and the Quran both say stupid shit, but they say it interestingly wrong in regard to the stars. In the Bible, the stars are smaller than the sun, and the sun is not a star, because these are ignorant, bigoted, superstitious savages who wrote this thing. They didn't know what the fuck they were talking about. They thought that the stars had personalities, and that a group of the stars could come down and wage battle against a single human being, and that stars could fall down from the sky, and that we could kick them around like soccer balls. Because I guess somebody kicked a meteorite at some point in the distant past. Who knows? But of course, we know that that's just an illusion, right? That the sun is a star, and then that the sun is bigger than we are, and that there are many other stars out there that are bigger than the sun. But the Bible insists that the stars are all smaller than the moon, and that the sun and the moon are about the same size. The Quran says much the same thing, except that the stars are not just smaller than the moon. The stars are pathetically small. They are lamps that are set in the firmament that angels can then use. They can grab these lamps and lob them at demons who try to get up to the pinnacle of the firmament, which is the dome over the earth, the solid dome. And this is where God's hotel is, where heaven is. And if demons get too close to there, then angels will grab a star out of the sky and lob it as a missile against the demon. And that's the Quranic explanation of meteors.
Pure science, obviously.
Allah be praised.
Speaking, all right, so we got at least one caller in the waiting room right now, so we'll hop to that soon. But again, this is a call-in show. We got the number down here, or the web link, number 1-720-619-2288, or the web link that is in the description for this. We definitely want to hear from you, and we give prioritization to theists for our discussions. But let us go to our first caller. This is Gabe from Texas, pronouns he, him. He wants to talk about the fine-tuning argument. I guess he wants to see how well it functions. So, Gabe, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
You're coming in okay.
Yep.
Okay. Hi, well, I'm an atheist, and I wanted to better respond to the fine-tuning argument.
Okay.
Go off. Still there, Gabe?
We're waiting.
Hello?
Hello?
How do you, yes, how do you respond better to the fine-tuning argument?
How do I respond? I thought you had your own response. Okay, well, the way
No,
I respond...
I'm an atheist. Yes, but
Yeah, well,
go ahead.
I'm an atheist too. I mean, so both of us should have their own response, right? So I thought you had one to present. I recently did a video against the fine-tuning argument. That okay, so the argument basically summarizes it that if things were significantly different, then things would be different, and if things were really, really different, then the life might not be possible anymore. Okay, so your complaint is that the universe is as it is, and we know that because we're here, and so the universe is such that we can be here, and so that people will argue that it can only be that way if there's a God. But of course, they'll argue that the only way that 4 can follow 3 is if there's a God, because they just need there to be a God no matter what. But the primary argument that the universe is fine-tuned for life, I think, is, I would call it laughable, but it's really sad. It's terribly sad. If you look at the vast expanse of the cosmos, how as 78 billion light years across or something like that, and we can only exist temporarily on a fraction of the surface of this one tiny mote of dust, and everything else where we might be able to sustain is so far away that we will never ever get there. So if there's some terrible calamity, if there's a rogue world that comes wandering into our solar system, for example, it doesn't have to hit us. It can just get near us and throw everything into disarray. There are so many things that can happen to our world that would mean that we would have to leave. But then where are you going to go? There's nowhere to go. The nearest potentially inhabitable planet is not very promising, and at our current technology, it would take us 3,000 generations to get there. 3,000 generations to get there, only to find a world that we can't actually live on. How is that fine-tuned for life?
And of course, I definitely find those objections to be very good. I also throw on what might seem to be technical, but basically show that the very logic of the argument fails. So first off, the idea with fine-tuning is, hey, the various physics parameters, if they were even the tiniest bit different, it would throw things off. But to make a probability argument, you have to say, well, some parameters are more or less probable than others. How do you justify that? And if you basically say, hey, these parameters could be anything else, then you actually work out and realize you can't produce a consistent probability distribution. If it's unbounded, if, like, say, the speed of light can be anywhere between 0 and infinity, you can't really actually describe then what is the probability that the speed of light will be 300,000 kilometers per second versus 1 kilometer per second versus 1 billion kilometers per second. And if you actually try doing the math, you realize the probability of the speed of light being anything is 0. In other words, the math just completely collapses. And this is something even Christian apologists have pointed out to show, hey, the fine-tuning argument mathematically fails right at the beginning because you have to define what's high or low probability. And well, perhaps that to me is probably the biggest starting point. It's like, hey, we can't even get this off the ground for what is more or less probable. And there's also another point with its implications. If the whole point of the universe is life, and we're saying that because of how improbable life is to emerge without these constants, well, can't we take that a step further and say the universe was created specifically for the production of iPads? Because to get iPads, you first have to develop life that develops intelligent civilizations, that develops the technology to start building iPads. That's even more improbable and even more fine-tuned. So it would seem that if we were to follow the argument, God is a lover of iPads, the Apple Corporation, he's got a lot of money in that stock. That's the reason it's $1 trillion company.
I also
Praise
think
be to
about
Tim
the
Apple.
beta fish in the pet store that you see in that little, they always have the beta fish in this little teeny cup of water, right? So imagine that your beta fish is not in a pet store, or is the only one in the pet store, is the only thing in the pet store, and the beta fish doesn't realize that there's an entire embarrassed world. There's no life on this planet anymore. There's just he's the last thing. He's the last surviving thing. This beta fish in this little cup, and he is convinced that the universe was created just for him. Because how is he alive?
Gabe, how do you feel about these responses?
It's just as impossible for that beta fish to get to another cup of water as it is for us to get to another planet.
Right. But usually what I do is, sometimes maybe I'm doing it wrong. I grant him the argument, and then I ask him, okay, well, which God is it? Why is it your God, your specific denomination, not the God that you don't believe in, like the Hindu God or Zeus or anything? Would that be a correct response, or that's not great?
Yeah, my tack is this. I mean, we have to start with, let's be realistic to start with. We know there was no global flood of Noah's Ark. We know that the Tower of Babel is just folklore, and that's it. Right? There is a kernel of truth in that Hammurabi started a tower he couldn't finish, and that's it. That's the only kernel of truth that story has. All of the rest of it is pure embellishment. Adam and Eve did not exist. We know that for certain. They're genetically impossible. The Garden of Eden is just a metaphorical fable. There's no possible truth to that story otherwise. The Exodus didn't happen. Moses didn't exist. The Bible was not written as long ago as some people think. I mean, the scholars are telling me that it's that most of it, most of the Pentateuch, in fact, is post-exilic. That most of the Bible, instead of being 1,500 years BC, is something more like 5th century BC. Most of it. So let's just start with the fact that the Bible is wrong. We start from there, and then let's look at what science can figure out about what's real. But of course, the whole argument, their whole everything, is to try to promote the Bible still being true, and it doesn't matter how false it is.
Okay. All right. Could I ask another question, maybe a different topic?
Sure.
Okay.
That's more for Dr. Aron Ra. Has Hawking radiation been detected yet?
Oh, detected? Unfortunately not, since even for the sake of the audience, Hawking radiation is a theorized source of radiation that you would actually get from black holes. That black holes are not actually perfectly black. They can give off some level of energy, and it's pretty much what Stephen Hawking had determined back in the 70s by basically taking general relativity, quantum mechanics, thermodynamics, and his gargantuan brain, putting that all together to come up with the results there. Now, problem is, black holes are absurdly far away, so we can't get them in the lab to measure anything, and the Hawking radiation from the black holes that are out in the universe would be too minuscule to notice. The rate of radiation goes inversely with the mass of that black hole. So the really big black holes that have the most to radiate the most slowly. So it'd be almost impossible to detect that against the background. Now, we could potentially detect Hawking radiation if we could produce mini black holes. And at places like the Large Hadron Collider, it's been one of the things that they have tried looking for. Depending on your particular version of physics beyond the standard model, you would have some rate of the production of microscopic black holes. So far, though, none have been detected, and I'm not too hopeful that that is going to happen, but if they did, they would also have an absurdly short lifespan, so we would see them basically radiate apart very quickly, and then that would be a direct detection. But as of right now, we don't have that direct evidence.
Okay. Could I ask, I guess, a follow-up dumb question? What did Stephen Hawking get his Nobel Prize for, or why did he? How did he figure that out about Hawking radiation?
Well, two things. One, Hawking never actually received the Nobel Prize, and two, now that he's dead, he will never receive the prize because they only give that to living scientists.
Okay.
Ultimately, the reason he probably wouldn't get the prize is because it hasn't been directly detected, and the Nobel Committee tries being a bit conservative and wants to make sure that they don't accidentally give out prizes to things that might get reversed. Because in the earliest days of the Nobel Prize, there were actual like reversals of Nobel Prize winning discoveries in like, I think medicine, I forget the exact details, but like early 1900s gave out a prize, and then a couple years later another scientist came along and completely disproved that person. And well, you don't want to have that keep happening. So in the same sort of way, Peter Higgs, for example, he is the person who back in the 60s predicted a type of particle that would ultimately be responsible for mass for many other subatomic particles. This becomes known as the Higgs boson. And we finally detect the Higgs boson in 2012, and then Peter Higgs gets the Nobel Prize. So he had to wait like 40 years between his prediction and the prize because it took that long to finally confirm it experimentally. So that's what we call damn conservative in giving out these prizes.
Okay. All right. So that's just maybe one more question.
One more, okay.
What is the great attractor? Because I mean, hello?
Go ahead.
One more question. That's your limit.
Okay. Yeah. What is the great attractor? How, could you explain that to me? I haven't been able to understand it.
Oh, yeah. So, okay. So this is very much at the edge of my knowledge, but this is something in astronomy where we look at a bunch of the galaxies in the local group of galaxies, ones that are close, and I'm putting quotes in gigantic square quotes because close means like tens of millions of light years, but those various galaxies, it looks like there is something that is pulling them in some given direction, and so we call that the great attractor because it's attracting them and it's great at it. But as I understand, it's still not clear what is the cause of that. If it's just like the sum of other massive bodies that we're just not able to detect. The biggest problem I remember in determining what the great attractor is that if we want to look at it, we have to look through the middle of our galaxy, and there's a bunch of crap in the way, basically. It's just a big dust ball in that direction, so it's hard to do any direct observations of what that could be. I don't know what the latest science is on determining what the great attractor is. I just remember that it's largely a mystery because we're not able to do direct observations in that direction.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess that's all my questions. Thank you very much, Aron Ra. Thank you, Dr. Aron Adair. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
So do we have any other callers waiting right now?
Yes, we do. We actually have a couple. We got one atheist and two theist callers. So again, reminder that the lines are open here on the line. We do give prioritization to theists, so I am going to bring in our next caller. So how about we take a look at William, pronouns he, him, from Virginia. And he asks, what do the hosts think the soul is? All right, so we're going to listen to soul music. I believe that's what William is talking about, right?
Yeah, well, let's bring him on. William, is that your
William,
question?
can you hear us?
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, William.
Hey, y'all can hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to ask a few questions about the soul. I personally don't believe that we have a physical soul as far as, like, Aron likes to describe, like, how Yoda on Star Wars, when he died, he came back as, like, the blue fluorescent figure, if that makes sense. But I hear a lot of Christians talk about the soul and say what?
I used to believe that. Really? Yep, I did.
I mean, I can imagine why it is a it. I just want to say I think the reason a lot of people believe that is because it's easy to imagine that there is some part of you that transcends your body, I guess.
Yep.
But as far as I know, I mean, the soul itself is really, like, I feel like what I really wanted to call about today is just discerning the line between what Christians and most theists think versus what like is true, and where I'm kind of having troubles with. So to clear up that is when Christians and theists a lot of times talk about the soul. A lot of times I feel like they're talking about this, like, you know, your soul is what gives you love, and your soul is what makes you get up in the morning. But that's not. There's nothing outside of your body that does that, and I don't see why there is a need for a soul. And I just wanted to see what you guys thought about that. I don't know.
There is no soul. People thought that we have souls because we breathe. And when you stop breathing, you die. So that's
right.
So people thought that
Yeah.
that the reason they couldn't understand. There was this thing called vitalism that was very popular from the 1600s through 1800s. Actually, it was older than that, because Anaximander had proposed some things about vitalism, that it was supposed to be this spiritual life force that was supposed to animate, non-living things. And there was a number of scientific discoveries that were really irritating the religious crowd, like when they discovered urea. It was that you could artificially create urine, because they thought that was a special property that only life could do. And believers still argue that that life can't form from non-living material. But I'm made of carbon and calcium and a bunch of other things that were not always living. The carbon and calcium and so forth that is in me has been dead for most of the time it's been around.
Fundamentally, you're made of non-living stuff.
Yeah.
I guess that there's that argument out the window. So, all right, if we don't have what Christians would like to think of as a soul, but do you think there's, all right, so like when people talk about like the spirit, right? Do you believe there's any form, like, all right, I don't want to say like what y'all are just talking about, but more of like when, like, if you have somebody that dies, right, and you think about them after they've died, well, the thought of them is still real, and therefore their spirit is still alive in a way. Not like, you know what I'm saying?
I'm not,
because
I'm not
I
sure
know a lot
what
of
you're saying,
musicians.
but I have heard the old saying that
I'm trying to
you
illustrate
die
my point.
twice. You die twice, when your body dies, and then again the last time someone remembers your name.
That's deep. Yeah. Yeah. Well, like, there's certain musicians I listen to that are like not alive anymore. And I always just wonder, their spirit lives on, not in like an actual, like, they're still around just like poking at people, but more like through their music, they're still alive in a way. And that to me is something that is above like the natural sense in a way, but it doesn't mean that they're actually a little blue floating thing out there. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
It does. I have to define what the word spirit means. And while I will confess that the only time that I ever feel as if I have a soul is when I'm listening to really excellent blues guitar. There's that transcendent moment, right? Well, these are just aesthetics. Yeah. These are things that make us human. The way that we envision other people and our compassion and so forth and our interest in them. But as spirit, and soul, they're supposed to be the supernatural element that controls or animates or manipulates our body, and which is supposed to be immune to things like brain damage or chemical addiction, or things like that. So when you take heavy drugs, or you get a spear through your head and you're still alive somehow, that there's things that happen to your body physically that your soul should be immune to, but isn't.
Yeah.
So there's no support. Daniel Dennett told me once upon a time that there was no support for mind-body dualism, neither in neuroscience nor even in philosophy. And I also spoke with Patricia Churchland, who said much the same thing.
Okay. So you're just saying that everything that a lot of people attribute to the soul is entirely like physical and all. It's pretty much in the brain. Like,
That's exactly right. Yes.
for example, a lot of people will attribute personalities to the soul, but a lot of times drugs and alcohol can change your personality. Therefore, that's not the soul. And there's a lot of things like that. So I get what you're saying there.
Pathogens, like when people have a tumor, it can significantly change their personality, their proclivities, their desires, or all of this. And then surgery to correct that can put it back.
Wow. So all right, that cleared up a lot. Well, what do y'all? One last thing I wanted to talk about, and I'll get off here. But what do y'all think about like psychedelics and spirituality? What do y'all think about that?
I know that there's a psychedelic root to a lot of spirituality, whether it was the use of opium in Asian religions or whether we have peyote in Native American traditions, ayahuasca, and so forth. I mean, and there's a lot of application of drugs, like the founding of the Mormon Church. Surprisingly, for all the do-gooder thing where they don't even allow caffeine or a cinnamon because they're stimulants. Yet the founders of these churches have reportedly been doing a lot of heavy drugs in putting that religion together.
Well, that makes you wonder what was the burning bush.
Yeah, in a place where opium is wild.
Was it actual bush, or is it? Was it a
Interestingly
a weed bush
enough, there is actually an altar from, I think, northern Israel, 7th, 8th century. I forget the exact dating it was found. They did some chemical testing on top of it, and there were traces of marijuana. So we know that they were burning those kinds of incense in at least some holy places in the Holy Land. So holy smoke, yes.
Holy smoke. Wow. Well, thank you guys. Y'all, I mean, I honestly probably already knew what y'all said, but y'all just pretty much affirmed it for me. You know, I've been trying to figure out exactly what that means to, you know, what is the soul, and honestly, I found no reason to believe in a soul, and no reason even to believe in a heaven or hell for my soul to go to. So why would I even need a soul in the first place?
Yep.
I am just what I am.
Yep. That's pretty much it.
And it helps. And I just want to say this last thing. It helps me realizing that helps me figure out exactly who I am.
Outstanding.
Rather than
Well, if
trying
you
to
can figure out who
out,
I am, that'll help me. I'm still trying to figure out what the heck I am.
Well, at least I have a basis now. At least I don't have to deny my earthly desires for what my soul needs. I don't even know.
Yeah.
All that craziness. Anyways, thank you guys.
All right. Thank you much.
Thank you for calling. Have a good night.
Yep. Have a good night.
Now, you said we had another theist.
Yes, we do. We have another theist that we can bring in as well. Remember that, yes, we do give prioritization to theists and also this call-in show. While, yeah, we do try to answer science questions, but sometimes we also like to intellectually wrestle. So if you got an argument that you want to have with us, you found the right people to wrestle with. And yes, we do pronounce it wrestling around here. All right, we do have another theist that we can bring in. So how about I bring in John from Ohio, pronouns he, him? Question is, does simulation theory indicate free will? John, can you hear us?
I can hear you, and I love wrestling too, so cool.
All right, John, you want to talk about simulation theory. So what's on your mind about it?
Yeah, so actually, I tried to call in a couple weeks ago or so when it was doing Forrest on, and I heard you mention something that I always thought was really interesting, and that's that, like, how because of just the rules of the universe, like the complexity of it, you would need to run a simulation of the entire universe to figure out what happens next. And to me, saying that and accepting like the Daniel Dennett view of consciousness, that there is no like mind-body separation, I feel like necessarily means that, like, for all intents and purposes, that's free will, because the future is not determined, and you are, like, your conscious experience is the very process that's consulting your memories, your past, and history, and making that determination. And I guess I'm wondering what you think about that.
Well, I know that Daniel Dennett was not a proponent of free will. So, I mean, we were under the impression that that our decisions are entirely our own. You give us a choice of things, and what we will decide. But whatever we decide is more likely going to be determined by how we were raised, the information that we've had prior to this, in our nature versus nurture, our natural genetic proclivities, and so forth. And so, you can predict how somebody's going to answer the question based on that information. And that's what some people are talking about when they say whether we have free will or not.
So I guess what I was making the point that, like, in order to make a prediction based on what the person would actually do, you'd have to run a simulation of the entire universe, and that's just what our universe is that, like, we are confronting novelty.
Well, I don't think that is true. I don't think you have to simulate the entire universe to know what you are going to do. What I would need to do is simulate basically your brain, the inputs that your brain receives to then predict your outputs. And if I had a sufficiently good simulation, then based on your brain and the inputs to that brain, I'd be able to predict your outputs. That would be if we had like that sort of model. You don't have to know the entire universe. You just have to know what's happening with the meat inside and what sorts of info is your brain receiving. And it doesn't have to access every atom, every photon in the universe to know what it's going to do.
Okay, well, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, so my understanding is that your body also does some levels of cognition as well. So, like, that's why we talk with our hands.
Well, there are organisms that have demonstrated some degree of sentience, of awareness of themselves in relation to the rest of their environment, who can demonstrate memory and some degree of problem-solving skills, even though these organisms have no neurons. They are brainless. They may be single-celled themselves. So unicellular organisms that can still demonstrate this. So while we are super heavily dependent upon our brains, we just put everything in the brain. But in fact, some degree of our cognizance actually does come from other cells.
Yeah, no, and honestly, when you're talking about what memory is, it's very hard to distinguish, like, memory from, like, the structure of your body in general, in a way, because it's like if I mess with a little single-celled organism and that makes a change, well, in theory, you could, like, analyze that cell and whatever, everything that's going on with it, and then figure out its prior state. And it seems like that our bodies, we can do that to ourselves, basically, but that we can unpack, like, our past, essentially. I don't know, whatever. But so I guess in order to determine, like, what state that we're in right now, I guess maybe this is kind of too abstract for me to, like, really make sense of, because I don't know how you would, like, simulate what decision I would make next without running a simulation of the whole universe, because, like, we're very complex. Like, I heard once that there's more information inside of us than there are subatomic particles in the universe, by, like, a large margin. And so, like, how do you, like...
Fundamentally, that can't be possible, because the whole universe contains us, so we can only be a subset of the whole universe.
No, patterns, because you're talking information is like different combinations of the way you could line up the atoms inside, or the neurons inside of me.
I see. So, okay, so all the different possible arrangements. Okay, that number could be greater than the number of subatomic particles. Sure, that doesn't mean necessarily that you need a computer of that size, because, for example, the different ways that you can arrange proteins can also be such huge astronomical numbers. You got the creationists usually throwing out some argument that, oh, DNA can't form because there would be like a 747 forming from a junkyard when a tornado came through, that sort of thing. And the thing is that not every arrangement is equally probable. That's one thing, is that not every arrangement of neurons is possible. I don't know enough about it, but for example, Chomsky's idea of universal grammar, that basically everyone has, in a sense, software in their brains that allows them to understand language at a basic level, so that way a baby can eventually learn their parents' language, and then even us as adults can learn other people's languages because we've got built-in modules in some sense. I'm not being literal here. I don't know enough of the science there, but the basic idea that there is a sense software already in our brains, and that means there already must be some way that our brains are arranged at the beginning of our lives that isn't just random.
Yeah. So basically, like, the way it works is like neurons they're already like wired up, but some columns are more likely to wire up to other columns than others. You know what I mean? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not completely just like, goo. So I get what you're saying. So there's going to be some constraint there. But like, what you're saying? Wouldn't that also, like, I don't know physics, quantum physics, or anything that well, but isn't like the current standing is that like the universe is not deterministic?
Well, when it comes to quantum mechanics, and I know everyone loves to talk about quantum mechanics, so we're going to talk about it. It depends on your interpretation of quantum mechanics, because there are deterministic interpretations of quantum mechanics. So, for example, the many worlds interpretation, it says, hey, the fundamental equation in quantum mechanics, the Schrodinger equation, it is a deterministic equation. You know what it says at time 0, you know what it'll say at time 1, at time 2, etc. You know exactly what it's going to be outputting at that time. The indeterminacy is just local.
You are using the definition that deterministic means that there's only one way that it can be?
Me or John?
Yeah. Or I guess that you could determine what's going to happen next.
Well, let's also, I guess, think about it this. We are pretty darn good at predicting solar eclipses, but we can't predict them perfectly, and we can't predict them in a billion years because there are inaccuracies that will build up in our models over time. Does that mean that the sun, moon, and stars have free will, or that there's just limits to our computation?
But like, what about the idea of like even like putting a perfect sphere on a perfect edge? Is that something that just doesn't happen in real life? Is that impossible to happen in real life, or is there actually like an unpredictable element?
So in real life, you wouldn't be able to get a perfectly smooth thing because, well, fundamentally things are made of atoms. You can't be perfectly smooth without having infinitely small particles. But I know the thought experiment you have that, yeah, if you had a perfectly smooth hill, put a perfectly smooth ball on that, you cannot determine which way it's going to go, or if it'll just stay on top, because they're all consistent with classical mechanics.
Okay.
So that's an example,
of a
I'm not trying Newtonian to system
like,
that's indeterminate.
I'm really curious about how like the universe unfolds, I guess. That is interesting to me. Because I'm not a Calvinist. I'm a theist, but I'm not a Calvinist. So, yeah. Sorry. Real fast. Just like some fruit for thought. Just from what the other guy was talking about, talking about a spirit. Can I bring something up about that?
All right.
Have you seen trailers for Bo Jung-ho's new movie? It's called Mickey 47.
I know nothing of it.
Okay. Well, it basically deals with, I think this is commonly known as like the Star Trek teleporter or transporter paradox. And that's that, like, I mean, it's the same deal of like, well, every like couple of years you have a new body. And so the story of basically the premise is like every time this person dies, they make him a new body, and like, oh, is that him or is that a clone? Is that the same thing? And honestly, I think it's like I don't know why this is such a paradox for people, because I think it immediately just leads to the conclusion that like, well, the boundaries of the self are kind of an illusion in a way. I mean, they're a useful construction for sure for survival, but I think as we evolve, we move in a direction where we see that like, no, more and more like treating you is the same as treating me, and that like my death is in a great sense an illusion. And we're talking about a spirit. We're talking about different ways of being, and I think that there are some ways of being that are eternal. And basically, one of the things I would say is that's most indicative of that is moving closer and closer to an alignment with something like the patterns of the universe. I think that's why when we listen to music, we kind of feel like timeless. We feel a great sense of power and a great sense of meaning, is because we can feel like our internal structure, our neurons, and our own experiences lining up.
So, John, I got a question for you. You said you're not a Calvin. Yeah. You said you're not a Calvinist, but what kind of believer are you?
I say I try to be a Christian.
Okay, because what you were describing sounds a whole lot more like pantheism from Spinoza, that basically our way towards immortality is based to become completely rational, and that way we're one with basically the laws of the universe.
I mean, I was more like saying radically self-sacrificial in a way, I feel like.
Nonetheless, it sounds like you basically have put the divine in everything that is that ever found essence. So that to me sounds like pantheism. So you're a heretic and you're going to get burned.
Well, that's what happened to Christ, right? It's all right. Yeah. No.
Well, you got to be careful. Yeah, they have much more difficult or terrible punishments in Ohio. I've been there.
No, but I actually think that is the case. Like the people who were, like Christ makes the case very clearly that the first people to kill him were the people who basically proclaimed that they spoke for the tradition the hardest. So, I guess I'm not that critique doesn't really scare me. I don't want to compare myself to Christ because like. Sorry, I lost connection. I don't want to compare myself to Christ because holy crap, that's a bad idea. But yeah, no, I'm just saying I'm not.
Well, I don't have a problem with it. I compare lots of people to Jesus. We got plenty of faith healers trying to, self-proclaimed exorcists trying to cure people's diseases by ridding them of demons. Yeah, there's plenty of people running that scam still today.
Well, there's actually like I learned this from Mike 11. People in the past remember me from a conversation where I was claiming that for complicated reasons, in basing some stuff off Mike 11 said, and I still believe this, it's like a panpsychist-based argument that rocks are in some way like a zero on a conscious scale, but like nevertheless on a scale. But anyways, like I learned from him that there's actually a long history of using hypnosis to cure problems in dermatology. What's the word? Like skin diseases. And even so, like that's the same theory basically behind. Yeah.
Show me the peer-reviewed study.
Huh?
Show me the peer-reviewed study.
I will. I mean, you can look it up right now. There's a long history of it. Like, it's not very hard to look up.
But
even so,
I doubt there's.
It's like on the NIH. You can find.
I doubt there's anything that's going to show that there's any demonstrable substance there.
Okay. I mean, I can post some links in the chat if you want. Like, if you Google this for like 2 seconds, it's definitely well like researched. But the same thing also works.
So I'm very quickly actually looking that up on PubMed, and basically it says, yeah, the treatment exists there because it's complementary alternative medicine. And do you know what they call alternative medicine that's proven to work?
Medicine?
There you
go. Exactly. So the fact it's still called alternative, it's basically a way of saying we ain't got the goods here. At least they can't show it in a scientifically valid way.
Yep.
This paper that I'm finding very quickly basically is trying to treat this with kid gloves and saying, I'll read the conclusion that I just found. This is from Hypnosis in Dermatology is the name of the paper. The conclusion: appropriately trained clinicians may successfully use hypnosis in selected patients as alternative or complementary therapy for many dermatological disorders. So they may use it on select patients as an alternative. That to me basically sounds like for some people they'll get the placebo.
Yeah, in other words,
well, I know. Hey, like I said, like I learned this from Mike 11, and he's like I said, he's at like a cutting edge biologist, like working on like the experimental edge, and he's very well respected, and he doesn't just say things for no reason.
Okay.
But that being said, like the idea is that like your conscious attention, including like your mind, there's different levels to it.
So like what Jesus is doing his faith healing thing, for example. If faith healing worked, if faith healing worked, faith healers would not be just rounding up the money from their parishioners. They'd be going into Children's Hospital and clearing out the burn wing or the cancer wing or the whole damn thing. But that never happens, does it? And nobody's going to be able to hypnotize you into believing that you don't have pimples, so you don't have pimples no more. Because hypnotism isn't a thing.
Okay. I guess I would say a couple things. I would say that I think we'll learn a lot in the future about, like, if you accept that I'm gonna die, your body will start giving out on you. Like, I don't believe in a mind-body separation. And like, just like how if the president gets up on stage and goes, "Everyone, we're done for," the executive function goes, "Everyone, we're done for," the whole body will start quitting out on it. Everyone will start making worse decisions. But if you say that, hey, there's this specific problem going on in this little area, bring all the attention, like, resources we can, whether that's through like acupuncture or through like hypnosis, it seems to actually do something. So
okay, how do you test that?
Like, you're made of billions and billions and billions of goal-directed problem solvers. They just need to be given the right goal.
Okay. How do we test this?
I mean, which part? The hip, like the fact that you can use hypnosis to cure skin diseases?
Hypnosis to cure dermatological issues. So we're going to clear up your skin by supposedly putting you in a trance and making you believe that you have clear skin? Are you going to do that with one subject? Are we going to do 30 subjects? Or are we going to have a control group?
I would imagine have a control group, and imagine you want to like take into account a number of factors. I'm not exactly sure what they hypnotize them into believing. I don't think they hypnotize them into saying that I don't have skin problems. I think they more like, focus on the skin problems, like feel it.
Okay, well, how then do you use hypnosis, which is not a thing? How do you use this pretend trance to cure a real world issue?
I mean, I think I was just explaining that. I mean, I think you should look into it yourself if you're more interested. I mean, I can come up.
I'm
with
not
more
the one that is interested. You were promoting to a large audience. There's over 1,000 people listening. You were promoting this alternative medicine that you said was legitimate.
Yeah, and I'll put it way harder than
I would
drugs.
think that you would be interested in learning how to test this, right? So let's say you get 12 subjects. They all have different dermatological issues, or are they only certain? Maybe we'll put them into classes. It's a number of people that have acne, and another people that have, specific allergies or whatever in the skin. However you want to classify them, and then from these different groups of people, you have multiple hypnotists, and test them all out, and see if there's fuck all that happens from any of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've been doing this for like a long time. I think this isn't a new field.
Can't find documentation for that.
No, I think Aron just did, and I think the reason why it's listed as alternative medicine is because like science can be kind of a slow process, especially if the mechanisms seem spooky, which it's really not spooky. It's just teleological.
Let's just pay careful attention to what Aron just pulled up. You can use this in accordance with actual medicine that really does stuff. You can use the thing that only pretends to do stuff. But if we were going to be testing this, if you were going to be testing this, we would not be confusing the issue by aligning it with medicine, so that the people who get medicine get better.
So I decided to do a little bit more digging, and there's actually a Wikipedia page for this. And there's this stuff here from the Mayo Clinic. It's a 2005, basically meta-analysis. And while the meta-analysis sounds positive, here are the number of, so it basically, a meta-analysis is you take a whole bunch of studies, or as many studies that are out there, condense them together, pick out the ones that seem to be best, use those to determine what's going on. So according to this, there is only one double-blinded randomized controlled trial It's from the 80s, and it had 6 subjects. I wouldn't use a study like that to conclude jack or squat. And that's the best controlled study, according to that meta-analysis.
Yeah.
No,
there are other ones here. The largest study has 57 people, and 57 people, on a statistical point of view, that is a tiny, tiny number. And the researcher has a lot of ability to accidentally, let alone purposefully, pop out positive results. So something like this, if these are the papers that exist out there for the meta-analysis, there's definitely not strong evidence that you can make your burn wounds go away or your psoriasis decrease. Not based on this level of evidence. This is far too weak sauce, in my opinion.
So,
I would go
like I said, I heard this from Michael Levin, who's like one of the most well-read biologists I've ever, like he's also on the cutting edge of like a lot of different. Basically, he doesn't call it this, but just to simply put, like bioengineering. He's very well respected. You can look at him with a lot of conversations with folks like, I don't know, who did he do recently? Whatever, which with like Don Hoffman and
we're interested in the results. So
no, exactly. But I'm just saying he's able to synthesize. Like,
we got 2 steps to do. We're going to first, one of the goals that you want to do is see if hypnosis actually does fuck all with regard to anybody's dermatological issues. But prior to that, I suggest we show whether hypnosis is even real at all. Because I don't think it is.
I mean, isn't hypnosis just like a form of meditation, really? I don't think it's like you can't use hypnosis to like mind control. It's not anything like that. You know what I mean?
Meditation includes things like turn off your mind, relax, and float downstream. There's a broad range for what people mean by meditation. Exactly. So I don't think that there's such a thing as meditation. So you'd have to show that there's a thing there. There's a reality there first. And then if you can show that, well, then at least we've got grounds to at least look at the second step. Or you can skip the first step and let's just go ahead and try to trance the kiddos into thinking they don't have pimples, and then see if they don't have pimples.
So my understanding of meditation is that when you do MRI scans, it's actually very similar to what happens when listening to music, where you see like a large flowing of large waves going back and forth, instead of like the kind of the sporadic things that's happening right now in my brain. But it's like a relaxed, like imagine like ocean waves, slower, larger type thing.
Yeah,
so
I fully accept.
Things are going.
You can put your brain in a state that will be reflected that way in an MRI. Yes, and religious, like prayer and such, for religious people, does produce the same effect as being on certain addictive drugs, which is why so many people leave one addiction for another and become religious. But that still doesn't show that there's any correlation to hypnosis curing dermatological issues.
I got you.
I'll throw another wrinkle in as well, because I'm looking at the actual meta-analysis here, and it's worth noting, you bring up the same person over and over again as an authority, but it's worth noting that smart people can come to stupid conclusions. Linus Pauling won the Nobel Prize twice for his work in chemistry, and he thought that vitamin C was the cure to everything, and including cancer, and he died of cancer. So you can be absolutely amazing in your field and still screw up plenty. So I'm just trying to go to the evidence rather than secondhand authority and saying like, hey, I'm looking at like these results here. And like among the papers or among the studies that this meta-analysis looks at, it also mentions, hey, in this study, did they even test if the people were hypnotizable? Did they actually even distinguish those who are and aren't susceptible to hypnotism? And most of them even say no. So it seems like in actually a lot of these cases, you can't even say these people were hypnotized. This looks like really, really crummy evidence to base any strong conclusions on, as I'm seeing it in this meta-analysis.
Okay. That's fine. Although I would add that, like, Michael Levin's kind of claim to fame is demonstrating. How do I put this? Well, I don't want to say the plasticity, well, but just how wide of a range of your things like your cells are capable of. Well, that they're demonstrating that they're goal directed, basically, and that they can take multiple pathways to a goal, essentially. So that would be in line with like his main sort of like discoveries and whatnot. So maybe you could say that like, well, he just wanted to see what he wanted to see in that one paper. But honestly, I've encountered very few biologists who are just are that much of a wealth of knowledge, which is why I keep bringing him up.
You can have a wealth of knowledge
I
and still be wrong. I claim to know lots of things, and I'm wrong about plenty, I am sure. Not anything I say here tonight, because everything I say tonight is perfectly right. Ex cathedra, everything I'm saying is correct. Just in general,
Same,
I would
absolutely.
try to rely
Right,
more
right.
on evidence and not on authority.
No, I got you. Yeah, and I looked at myself and I've read some of those things briefly, but I just saw that like, oh yeah, it's a thing. I mean, I was surprised that it's like had that the NIH came up when I typed it in, and I was like, holy shit. So I didn't go that deep into it.
Yeah.
But,
It's also
yeah.
worth noting one other problem that's actually a problem in general with complementary and alternative medicine, that the vast majority of the studies out there are there to like show that it works. So you have a major bias in the sorts of studies that will get published. There's already a bias in the field to publish positive results, and it's even more so for CAM because they're trying to legitimize themselves. To give you a hyperbolic example of it, in the US, in the West, when there are studies of acupuncture, there's basically kind of like 50-50-ish of those that come back positive, those that come back negative. But in studies from China, where the tradition is supposed to come from, virtually all studies from China come back and say acupuncture works. And the thing is, we actually have good studies that show it's bunkum. So you can see those sorts of biases pushing certain results to pop out or certain studies to be done that are more likely to look good, even if there are better studies that show it doesn't work, or they
And
refuse to do the better studies.
Quit killing rhinos to try to eat their horns to solve your erectile dysfunction. That doesn't work either.
True.
And also leave the pangolins alone.
But I know I do think I mean there's I think there's good evidence to actually suggest that acupuncture probably works. Like no, I'm not a big like alternative medicine guy, although I am a big like chill out with the medications type of guy for sure.
Okay.
But
the
yeah.
thing is, though, with
Something
acupuncture,
else-
when there have actually been good studies of that, they literally will put the needles in random spots rather than the acupuncture points and get the same results. Sham acupuncture and real acupuncture give the same results, which really shows this is ultimately a placebo sort of effect we're looking at. Not there's actual magical points that can be affected by needles.
Penn and Teller did a
no,
wonderful
I mean, my
study.
understanding was it wasn't that it was magical points. I just thought it was like taking a cold shower, like it wakes up your whole body.
No, literally in acupuncture, in the medicine views there are meridian lines and these special points that you're supposed to activate because they basically will interfere or help realign your chi or other vital forces. That is like the theory of acupuncture. It's also worth noting, original acupuncture, you don't want. If you look at older pictures of what acupuncture is, they aren't these tiny little needles. You're basically being speared by your doctor all over your body. And if you survive from the wounds, it will already be a miracle in itself. But that is the original acupuncture. It is horrendously painful, and we've now got the much kinder version where it's a bunch of poking on your body because that's what people will tolerate. And also, a lot of it was promoted as well by, from what I understand, for political reasons in China because they couldn't get good, real medicine to most of the population. So they basically pushed out a lot of people doing more quote-unquote traditional medicine because it was cheaper and easier, and there was enough of a placebo effect to make it look like the central government was doing something.
That's wild. You know, something else.
Yeah, science being politicized. Who knew that could happen?
No, right? No.
Yeah.
I'm still not completely convinced, but I think.
Well, there's plenty to explore. You do not want to go by authority, even though I am correct. You definitely want to go and explore these things and be critical of the stuff out there. And to do that, though, I think we do need to let you go and move on to our next call. Is that all right, Johnny?
Okay,
or John, I'm sorry, John.
Fine. All right, thank you. You have a good one. Bye-bye.
All right, have a good night.
I'm holding a tiny anaconda.
And what does your anaconda want?
Buns, hun.
Sorry,
Right,
if you're going to
so
bring a snake like that, there's two options: Mix-a-Lot or the not so great movie with Jennifer Lopez.
okay. All
All
right. What's
right,
about our next
let's
caller?
move. All right, so our next caller, I see we have Mason, goes by pronouns of he, him, from Idaho. Okay, Mason, can you
Yep.
hear us?
Yes, I can.
How you doing?
Hello. I'm doing all
Welcome
right. How
aboard.
are you?
Doing all right this last day of September. What would you like to talk about?
Well, so I grew up with, I mean, not grew up, I guess you could say I was born with ALL, childhood leukemia. And I grew up ex-Mormon, or Mormon, not ex-Mormon, my apologies. And
Kind of hard to grow up ex-Mormon.
Yeah, right. And so the common response that I've consistently received when I talk about, being a cancer survivor is, oh, well, God knew that you were strong. And so that's why he gave you cancer. And he knew you could do it. And, and I don't know, I feel like that's a pretty fucked up thing to say to a kid consistently. I mean, even my parents would use that as an example for God. That, well, my kid beat the odds. He really stuck it to the demons and stuff. And he is, he survived, and so therefore, like, God is real.
Well, if
I
I
guess
decide that
my
you're
my
tough enough to, if I decide that you're tough enough to withstand it, I can slap you in the face every day and call that divine.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing, is if God is all knowing, why did he put me through? Like, it feels like a sick joke, and especially like growing up with all of my friends. Like, I went to, I don't know if you guys have heard of Camp Rainbow Gold, but it's a really nice place for, other childhood cancer survivors that, a lot of them, or not a lot of them, but a few of them, when I would come back the next year, did not make it. And so for me, in my brain as a kid, I'm thinking, well, so God thought they were strong enough, so he put them through it for no reason, but he killed them anyway. I don't know. I guess, how do you get through to someone like that when they're just consistently using you as evidence for God?
Well, have you noticed that it doesn't matter what the outcome is? Praise be to God. If you survive unscathed, praise be to God. If you survive at all and you're debilitated for the rest of your life, well, God spared your life. And if you didn't survive, well, then God needed another angel. There's always a bullshit excuse, because believing in the God matters more than you do.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I
Yeah, it feels
sorry, go ahead.
inhumane to especially use you as a prop in that sort of way. So, not that I have any sort of experience that's comparable to yours, but I would just think that the best, or at least a way to deal with that, is to say, try to reach their own humanity and basically say, hey, you, Bob, Dad, cousin Bill, whatever, relative or friend is saying this to you. I think you're a good person. Would you ever give someone cancer for any reason? Would you ever see that that is a good idea? Can you imagine you infecting someone with such a terrible and very often terminal disease? And I would hope they would say no. In which case, you have to then ask, then why are you, my friend, my mother, my cousin, what have you, why are you more moral than the master of the universe?
Yeah. I think it's also just frustrating too. I mean,
Yeah.
You know, my family is, I know they're Mormon, and so I've consistently brought up that, you are paying tithing to this corporation, this evil corporation that is fooling you and everyone around you, and they just. I think the worst part of it is I get silent, and that's almost like I know what you're saying, but like, I'm
The
going to believe
world's
anyway.
richest religion, founded by a convicted fraud on drugs.
Yep.
Was also into organized crime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did a 6-hour interview with Bryce Blankenagel, and we're going over the history of the Mormon faith, and it is creepy what Joseph Smith and his cohorts got up to. Running brothels where the prostitutes were also assassins at his command, so that they could eliminate his political opponents and then dump their bodies in the river.
I had no idea about that. That's crazy.
Did you know that Joseph Smith was convicted of fraud, and then somebody gave him? They decided not to jail him. They gave him walking papers or some sort of thing where, like, it's a suspended sentence kind of a thing, where the judge just let him go. He was convicted of using seer stones to find secret treasure, and this was just fraud because he's not finding treasure. He's just taking people's money to find treasure, and then coming up with bullshit excuses for why his seer stones didn't quite get there, or how the treasure was somehow moving underground to escape their detection. He was convicted of that.
Oh my God, dude.
And then a year or two later, he starts the Mormon Church by using seer stones to find the golden tablets he wrote.
And then what was it? Fannie Willis. She hid the scripts and told her husband to tell him to write it again, and he got unbelievably angry. Which is like, you should be able to do it, no fucking problem, dude. Like, I don't know, it's ridiculous. It's just.
I'm glad you knew that story, because that's a brilliant one. I love that one.
Oh yeah,
that woman is a skeptic.
The South Park episode is wonderful too.
Oh, I forgot that was on South Park, wasn't it?
Oh yes,
yeah.
And that part in particular was in the song said to be smart.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. It's baffling to me. It really is. I just, I try to run through, like, how do you continue to believe in this? Like, I remember being in general conference one day, and Thomas S. Monson being like, don't go looking outside of the church. And that for me was enough, that it's like, well, why do you not want me to look? Like, if the church is so true, if the church means like the truth and only the truth, then why do you not want me to go look at these falsehoods if they're obviously falsehoods, And it's, what an evil man. All of them, it's
all of them. Yes.
Anyways, it's really frustrating, because a lot of the people that that are in these church, the way that me and my fiance have always talked about it is that they are such a force to be reckoned with, and they are really, really intelligent when it comes to other things. Like, I mean, my parents are in the medical field, right? And I don't know how you can go through that type of education and still believe that, yes, there is an all-knowing creator behind all of this, intelligent design, It's just, because, like, if you guys saw the other side, if you guys were on the side of, like, pursuing truth, like, you would be raising hell. Like, and I know that you guys don't have the answer for how to convert people, and know that you guys are looking for the answers too, because that would be amazing, but it's exhausting. But
Part of it
Indeed.
is having. Part of it is going to be just having frank conversations, one person to another person, to slowly but surely change the culture, change the conversation. You don't convert people overnight. Some people you may never convert, but we can all at least grow a little bit together. And Mason, I have to say, I'm glad that you were able to have that victory over cancer, and I'm hoping that you and your wife-to-be have a wonderful life together, and a long one at that.
Oh, sorry, you guys cut out a minute. Hold on.
Oh,
Hello?
Yeah, we
I
still
hear
hear
you.
you.
Can you hear us?
Hello.
We hear
Okay,
you.
fixed it. Okay, sorry. What was that?
I was
hear you
basically,
guys
I'm happy to repeat. So, Mason, I say I'm happy that you were able to beat leukemia. That is awesome news, and I hope you and your wife-to-be have a good and long, wonderful life together.
Yes,
Oh,
and for those
thank you
of you
so
who
much.
were not able to understand everything he just said, I'll translate that in Vulcan Sign Language.
Thank you.
So say we all.
All right, well, I'll let you guys go, but I appreciate you guys answering my call. So,
Thank you kindly.
We hope the best for you. All right. All right, we do have a few more callers in our waiting room, but of course, if you still want to call in, 720-619-2288, or use the web link in the description to come on in. Also, remind that the show you're watching now, SkepTalk, is part of the network here on the line. We are on Mondays, but tomorrow there is Chewed Gum. That'll be with Eve Was Framed and Alyssa Ljub. Wednesday, we got The Hang Up with Matt Dillahunty. Thursday is the Transatlantic Call Show with Arden and Ben. Sunday, we have two shows, the Sunday show and then the Sunday After Dark show. The hosts for that one are yet to be determined, and also come next Monday, there'll be even more SkepTalk with hosts to be discovered. Come one, come all, and find out what we have in store. All right, so I'm looking at our list of callers, and we have another theist caller that we should bring in. So Chris, pronouns he, him, from North Carolina, apparently has a theory for how the universe came about. Can you hear us, Chris? Hello.
Yes. Okay. I just have, although I believe in God and Jesus, sometimes I like to just use our imagination. So if there was no God, I have a proposition about what the universe is and how it came.
Fire away.
Okay. The universe is like a number line, with 0 being the starting point. But the Big Bang, whatever happened, the universe not only expands in the three dimensions, but it also is expanding backwards in times and forwards in times. And just like the number line, each number has a relationship to every other number on the line. If you try to go back to the beginning of the time, you might think you have found the first cause, but later you discover that even that cause, that first cause, has another cause, and infinite regression. But everything that ever happened, past, present, and future, eternity past to eternity present, like the number line, is already there. It's happening this moment right now.
Well,
are you there?
Yeah, we're here. And here's the thing. What you're describing is, with a whole lot more math, an actual cosmology model that Sean Carroll and one of his former grad students, Chen, so Carroll Chen, have a model that basically suggests that the Big Bang is basically an inflection point where time is going in opposite directions. So basically, with your number line, we have time going in the way we know it here on the positive side of the numbers, and on the negative side, time is, from our point of view, going backwards. And
I thought that was
if there's
the
anyone
arrow
else in that, it's related to, yes. Yeah. So the arrow of time is actually being explained there by entropy, because if you basically can imagine at that point of the Big Bang, if you have the expansion going in opposite directions, along the timeline, that expansion will also be an increase in entropy in both those directions. So you can explain the error of time that way. So that's the utility of it. So basically, Chris, what you're describing, if you add a fuck ton more math to it, you basically get the Carol Chen cosmological model. Is it correct? I don't know. Nobody really knows yet, but it is one of the active things being pursued.
And by a fuck ton more math means that to start with, instead of saying that 0 is your starting point, remember that you're putting it on a Cartesian coordinate system.
Okay, and the universe it is constantly changing, and this universe is what it is now with matter and energy and life forms. But in a previous existence, it could have been a totally different colors, totally different laws, totally. My mind cannot fathom what it could have been, but the universe is like a constant struggle of life against death. Life is constantly trying to aspire and to get to the top, always being brought back down to death, but it's always rising back up again. And once you got the eternal conflict of life against death and against life going on forever and ever and ever.
So is he talking about an asymptote at the Big Bang?
My impression is that there are previous versions of our universe, but are so potentially different from what we know that it's just incomprehensible. Am I reading you, Chris, correctly?
Exactly. And
maybe.
Life is always finding a way to rise. Death is always finding a way, entropy, to bring it back down, but it always finds a way to rise back up. It's constantly life. Who knows? Maybe the cosmos is a type of consciousness, and that may bring in free will. To me, if free will is free will possible, if consciousness is an element all of its own, something we don't understand, then free will is possible. But if consciousness is not, then free will is just an illusion.
Well, we had this conversation a little bit earlier with some other callers, but our basic idea is that consciousness is a result of what the brain does. So fundamentally, consciousness is a result of matter energy. It's not another substance. That's our best conclusion of the science right now.
But I think that, Aron Ra, didn't you say one time that there might be a consciousness behind the universe?
No.
Okay, I thought you did. But
I think what Chris, I think what you are getting at is that Aron used to be a believer in all sorts of spooky things, and in that sort of state. Then there's a grand consciousness, so that way he can do his Jedi mind tricks.
Oh. But I just thought I'd share that, to get some more feedback to make sure I'm going on the right path, or if I'm screwed up. So that I just decided to call in. Yes, I still believe in God and Jesus, but I also allow my mind to I read books of other things and Christianity and Judaism, and I just want to learn. That's all I want to do. I just want to learn and know the truth.
That's definitely admirable. I have to ask then, since you're exploring these things, what sorts of explorations have you done to see if Christianity is true?
I watch a lot of atheist shows, and from what I've seen, that this is not the Christians' finest hours. From what I'm seeing going on, they're always losing the arguments. I just can't get rid of Jesus, though. I just can't. But still, I watch. The way I see it, if God's real, He'll win out. He'll win out. If He's not real, He'll lose out. That's the way I see it.
Okay. I kind of see it that way too, and I see that there are more unbelievers now as a demographic than there are Protestants in this country.
Yeah. And it makes it so hard to me when they've proven that there was no Noah's Ark, no Adam and Eve. I just take the C.S. Lewis approach to that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's important. Even if there is a God, there still wasn't an Adam and Eve, and there still wasn't a Noah's Ark.
Yep.
Yeah, if there is a God, it's so different than anything else we've imagined, because what we've imagined so far ain't it.
And what all these Christians claim to have near-death experiences and divine revelations, they make me so mad. They make the Christians today are putrid. They're not loving. I've tried to reach out to many of them, and they just blow me off. And not Jesus. I still believe in Jesus, but Christianity today is a wet noodle. It's a goddamn joke. Hello.
So, Chris, it sounds like we got more agreement than disagreement here. So, when you decide to become a full atheist, you're going to have a welcome group over here.
Oh, thank you, but I can't. I just can't get rid of Jesus. It's like in the ear and
Have you
the
tried
about
glue traps? You said you can't get rid of Jesus. Have you tried glue traps?
No. Damn. And
I think that's the best way to conclude a call, don't you think?
And boy, I have a message, about the political stance. Trump's problem was he tried to drain the swamp. Swamps are good for life. It's not that swamp that needed to be drained in Washington. It's that goddamn sewer. He drained the wrong thing.
That's a different sort of discussion. I'm going to say, I guess I'm going to reveal my own politics. Trump did not drain the swamp. He decided, what if the swamp was on fire and had more alligators? And the alligators were Nazis.
And the alligators are not.
Well, my brother's on the line to get in. I better get off, but thanks.
All right. Thank you for calling in. Good night.
Bye.
All right. Booyah. Okay. So, I got two more callers here in the queue, and one of them has been patiently waiting for an hour, so they must be talked to. Let me bring in, I know I'm going to be mispronouncing this, Ardios, they, them from Oregon. Ardios, please tell me how to correctly pronounce your name. I do not want to butcher it.
Oh, no, that's all right. That's fine. It's a pseudonym anyway.
Okay.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we hear you just fine. What would you like to chat about tonight?
So I mainly had questions. I was raised in Scientology. I'm not a Scientologist anymore. I've been out for about 7 years. But I guess one of the things that stuck with me from it was the concept of a soul being, I guess, an electrical being, but I don't really hold to that belief anymore. I'm more curious about I know that photons, when collided, they can produce a matter and antimatter pair, and so I was wondering if in some way that means that matter is another form of what people might colloquially call energy.
Matter, well, I should let the physicist answer this because you'll be better at it, but I've heard other physicists say that matter is slowed down energy and energy is sped up matter.
And that's more or less correct. That, we even see that directly in the most famous equation in all of physics, E equals mc squared, the direct relationship between mass and energy. So matter basically is a sort of form of contained energy, balled up in a new sort of form, and it matters to us because we matter.
Great. Yeah, that was about what I was the same lines that I was thinking along. So it's good to have a bit more concrete information on that. And then I guess going down a similar route. So I was kind of another belief that I held on to for a bit was the idea of reincarnation, but not from any kind of karmic or intended form. And I know in Scientology that they say that like you go to Venus and they put in a bunch of crazy science fiction shit because it's fucking Scientology. But I still I feel like I could understand the possibility of reincarnation just as a transfer of the electrical impulses that make up our our consciousness, I guess. And so I was wondering if that is too misinformed of a concept of that.
While there is electricity going through our brains, I mean, you have synaptic connections that are unique. It's a unique matrix in all of our minds, and these are built by our repeated experiences, muscle memory, martial arts, aptitude. I mean, whether you can play piano and so forth. I mean, these are all, and the things that that frequently come up in conversation versus the things you knew 20 years ago but haven't talked about in a long time and completely forgot. These are the way that the mind is dynamic, constantly in motion, building new synapses and losing others. But if you're going to be talking about the soul as being electronic, well, that means it's physical. That means it's testable, and there's some way to isolate it from the rest of these synapses.
Right. Yeah. And so I guess I was wondering mainly if there has been anything remotely demonstrating that sort of upon death a loss or expelling of electric. I keep wanting to say energy, but I know that that's not really the right word to use for that.
Well, if they're gonna say in their brochures or whatever it is that you're reading from, that if they're calling it electricity, well, then there's ways of measuring that.
The closest thing I can think that even exists out there is the very crappy study from about 100 years ago that when a person dies, allegedly they lose 23 grams that can't be accounted for by anything else. And I say crappy study because if memory serves, it was based on 4 corpses and a not well calibrated scale, among other issues apparently that old study had. So that's the best that I've heard about any sort of relationship between the living and the dead and what changes in that sort of direct physical thing that leaves. Ultimately, it seems like what consciousness is what your brain does, and once your brain stops working, that's it. The best we could do is make some sort of copy, but then it would still be whatever you are in that body still dies, still suffers, still feels the last breath, and some other copy goes on, and maybe copy of you is doing interesting things, but the you in the current body right now gets to have all that wonderful experience of what death is. And, well, that's what we're all trying to avoid. And unfortunately, it's not a great avoidance technique. It's at best a copy-paste technique.
I think people of my generation got a nice demonstration of what death is like, because it doesn't happen with modern TVs and video screens or whatever. When you turn it off, it's just off. But when we had these cathode ray tube televisions back in the day, you turn it off and the whole image just shrinks into a little white dot, which then fades to black.
I like that concept of it. That's about my same interpretation, I think. Well, thank you very much. That I had some notes down here, but I think that answered everything that I wanted to ask. So thank you.
All right. Thank you for calling.
Have a great night.
You too.
Alrighty. Okay. So right now, looking at the queues, it looks like we got one last caller waiting in. Let us bring in Debbie from Australia. Pronoun she, her. And Debbie, can you hear us from all the way down under?
I certainly can. You hear me okay?
Yep.
We hear you fine.
Perfect. Firstly, I've got to say a bit of an ex-Mormon theme running through, and Aron, you did something, as an ex-Mormon of 15 years, you've done something today that's very rare for me nowadays, which is you told me something about Joseph Smith and the early church that I didn't know, that whole drug angle, so I can see myself going down a bit of a rabbit hole on that one.
Yeah, you should watch that
but
6-hour interview with Bryce Blankenangel. He's like the foremost authority on critical examiner of Mormon history. But it was really surprisingly dark.
Bryce?
Yeah.
What was the surname?
Bryce Blankenangel or Blankenagel.
Blankenagel.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'll hunt for it. I've got 6 hours. Sure. But what I more wanted to talk about today was just why humans find it so difficult to let go of the idea that there's something beyond this life. Like, even, and I'm not saying that I've never had trouble with staring into the void. I mean, I think I went through that stage where, I really grasped the idea that this life does not have objective meaning. And, I worked through that, and then I got to a stage where I just realized I had to now create what the meaning was, choose what the meaning of my life would be, and pursue that. But even when I deal with people who are not theists, so there's a little meditation group, and they're a lovely bunch of people, but despite the fact that they don't even believe that the self is real, somehow they cannot let go of this idea that we're all connected to the universe in a way that will mean we exist after this life. And I'm not sure what it is about humans that can't let go of that idea. I mean, of course, some people do, but I'm just saying it seems that even in places where I'm not dealing with indoctrination of religion and all of that, I'm still finding people all the time who cling to the idea of the supernatural. And I'm sorry, I feel like I'm not articulating this into a nice, pithy question, but I am very curious to know your thoughts on that, and whether this phenomenon is something you, I don't know more than me about.
Well, I unlike a lot of other atheist activists who started out as Christian doing seminary school or the ministry or missionaries or whatever before they fell away from the faith, I went a slightly different direction. I mean, I was a reborn Christian for a whole minute, but I spent most of my time as a neo-pagan spiritualist and experimenting with transcendental meditation and that sort of thing, because I thought that there was a way to personally experience the supernatural, and I wanted to, so that I had firsthand information, because I couldn't find anybody that can give me consistent facts. Everybody's story is so wildly off, out of the norm from everything else.
Mm.
Yeah. I eventually came away that it was frustrating that I wasn't able to verify anything, that I wasn't able to show any truth to it at all. But in my path, I came up with concepts of reincarnation and just trying to understand how the supernatural world would be. I think I was more influenced, honestly, by Star Wars than I was by any mainstream religion. Had I read the Tao Te Ching first, I would have identified as a Taoist, but it happened that I saw Star Wars first, so I identified as a Jedi for a bit.
Right.
That was literally my religion. I mean, they're basically the same thing. Taoism mixed with Confucianism is basically what Jedi is. And so I had had really lovely concepts of reincarnation and how one life, one former life becomes the next life. It's not pure. It's like my idea was that if you take, this is me, okay, and when I pour this water out into this vast ocean, that will be me recombining with the biosphere. And when you take this glass, and after you've poured yourself out, you dunk it right back in exactly where you just dumped it a second later. You're going to get some of you. You're not going to get all of you. You're going to get a mix of a bunch of other things too. You're going to get mold and fungus and ants and dogs and parakeets and all kinds of stuff mixed in with you. And that's why people can't remember their past lives, because it's all jumbled up. That was one of my concepts for reincarnation. One of the other thoughts that I had about it was if you build a statue out of clay, the clay is only malleable when it's wet. And that's the life force that's intermixing with the material matter. And that as the life force ebbs out, then of course then it becomes dust to dust again. As the water evaporates and joins back to the hydrosphere. And this is how I was examining the concept of a soul. I'm really embarrassed to admit all this kind of stuff now, but this is honestly what I believed as a young man.
And I'm not going to say I'm knowledgeable about people's psychology. It's definitely not my area of study. So I'm going to just be speculative here. But I think the fundamental thing is we humans have the unfortunate gift of knowing our mortality and being able to actually see it as a forthcoming thing. It's not something that ants have to necessarily worry about. They can try to avoid it, but they can't consciously necessarily think about, one day this whole ant life of mine is over. For humans, it is. And we don't like it. Our most basic biology is to try to avoid death. And we know we can't. And anything then that can come along, that can whisper that there's a chance, is just such a clarion call, or siren call, that it will take us against any rock, because anything seems better than what mortality appears to be. I think that drives a lot of it, that I don't want to die. No one really wants to die. And if you could find a way for me to not do it, I would, especially in a moment of weakness, leap at it.
Yeah, within limits. I don't want to make any arrangement that's going to be forever. I don't mind living a little longer.
Yeah, forever without the option to opt out is a very terrifying.
Yeah, if you can't end it by any means, no.
Yeah, no, terrifying. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine the sun goes supernova, the Earth is destroyed, and you're still hanging about, going, well, what do I do now?
Yeah. I'm imagining even a situation like Wolverine with his amazing healing factor. Eventually he's just going to get stuck in a hole, and he's just there in a hole forever and can't get out.
Yeah.
Yeah, death at that point seems preferable.
Oh, dear. Look, thanks, guys. No, it's interesting. It's I don't know. I understand that these kinds of things also make it possible for us to, live in a futile world and deal with lives that are sometimes brutal. And it's the reason I try not to trample too much on people's faith, even if I find it. Yeah, I mean, even if I'm at the stage where I just think, look, what you believe is ridiculous, but it's hard to tell people to give up something that keeps them going, even if I think it's the better way. And my life is exponentially better since I left my religion and gave up a whole bunch of crazy ideas that I used to have. And I see that. But gosh, it's hard to just assume that every single person would be better off. It's I don't know, maybe we just live in a really harsh world, and Yeah. And sorry, I'm now rambling, and I will let you guys go. But thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for calling, Debbie.
Yeah.
Have a good night or morning, as the case might be.
Yeah, she's in tomorrow.
Yes. Australians have always been in the future.
One of the
All
problems
right,
that I had
that
with
is.
spirituality. One of the problems I had with spirituality was that the theology that I would hear other people recount to me always seemed so infantile, like it wasn't thought out. You know, it's just like, I don't know, like a Saturday morning children's show would be the plot points. I mean, there would be like so much more analysis needing to be done, and people spend their entire lives doing this kind of crap, and they come up with theologies that don't match anybody else's. And I know they're all intricate in their own right, but they still seem infantile to me, like they haven't analyzed what I would have thought were like the first questions we should be looking at.
Well, there's a few folks at the Vatican who would like to have a few chats with you, I think. Because definitely there are folks who have definitely thought about theology a lot, but yeah, when I go into it, it seems like you got some assumptions here that I think we need some justifying before we build off these sky castles we got going on here.
Indeed, yes.
All right, so yeah, all of our callers are in, so let's go over to these super chats. Aron, how have you start?
All right, $5 from Zachary Herink. Aron, what's the verse for when the serpent tells Eve that they won't die if they eat the fruit? Could Google it, but this way you get paid. If I remember correctly, because there's different translations, the Lord knows that you will surely not die, or something along that. The translation that I like best is more along those lines. You will not die in that day. No, I've already blown it.
Let's see, Snaky. I thought it was in. Oh, serpent. That's the word I need to look for.
Oh, your eyes will be opened. Yes.
Yes.
God knows that your eyes will be opened.
Yeah, and my memory was right. I just checked. It is in Genesis 3. The certain says you will certainly not die. That whole thing is a lie. So yeah, Genesis 3 is when Eve and the serpent are having their chat about forbidden fruit.
And this is where the serpent calls out God for lying.
Yep. All right, we got $5 from S. Yaley. All right, Yale. Yes, Yale. Yes, JL. All right. My fine-tuning argument is just that the universe is not fine-tuned for us. We are fine-tuned for the universe. Shockingly, via evolution. Definitely locally true. The question is, does that work at the grandest of scales for the universe? Because the better fine-tuning arguments are saying, hey, stars can't even form if these constants are different. But as you just say, that in some ways that we're fine-tuned for the universe, because if we do run the argument that, hey, we're so improbable, then the universe was built for iPads, because that's even more improbable.
That is 50 Swedish kroner from L Music Rec for Aron. The ocean post/progress. The ocean post/progressive metal with concept albums about different time periods of our planet. Highly recommend Phanerozoic 1 and 2. Thank you for that. I'll look into it.
Now we got $5 from Monkey at Typewriter. Man, these quantums must be breaking down all the time if they need all these mechanics. Especially when they don't bolt things down, they just glue on. Okay, I'm sorry, but these particle physics jokes are decaying real fast.
$5 from Stomp 10. Great show, gentlemen. By the way, Aaron Adair looks like Ryan Reynolds, in my opinion.
I've gotten that occasionally. Originally, though, I remember my wife saying I looked like Josh Groban. And apparently that was enough reason for her to stick around with me. So I'm going to take that comparison, even though I can't sing for the life of me, let alone at Groban's level.
Yeah, I wish I could say something similar, but I remember taking a picture of my Jeep when it looked particularly badass. And I said, I don't think that my Jeep is pretty. I think it's ugly in just the right way. And my wife replied, in public, that's how I feel about you.
All right. $4.99 from Confused Ape. Aron Ra for President 2024. Aron is the only one on here that has seen my horrific Bible verse head tattoo that most of you know about.
Yep. Yeah. Well, now they all see it. $5 from Mr. Baruchia 10. More music for Aron. Arion. Start with album into the Electric Castle. Unleash the Archers. Start with album Apex. Good stuff. Also, yay snacks.
We got $5 again from Monkey at Typewriter. If the administering entity for a test knows all the results ahead of time, the test is definitionally just a means of fucking with you. I tend to agree. If I am teaching students and I know exactly what they're going to get, why am I wasting everyone's time?
$5 from Alias Hana. There was an Alias Shana. Silverbow. I had a dream last night about being replaced by a clone. I felt myself dying and then woke up as the clone. It was disconcerting.
Ooh, you're creeping me out now. Oh boy, that's a creepy idea of a dream. We got $5 from Milwaukee Atheists. You look great, Aron.
$5 from Blackwater Ted. If you had the means to bring back Neanderthals, would you? There's a lot I would bring, but it depends on what the means is, and there's other things to consider there. If I had a TARDIS and could just go back and grab whatever I wanted to from whatever time period and bring it forward and raise titanosaurs or trilobites or whatever, yeah, I'd be doing that.
$5 from Carissa Grimm. Aron, what is your third favorite snake? Thanks for the show.
My third favorite snake in my house right now is my baby 30-inch long hatchling albino lavender reticulated python that is right there. I would pick him up, but he just ate yesterday. But it's tiny. It'll be 16 feet eventually, but right now it's just a teeny tiny little beautifully colored shoestring that my wife bought for me. And his name is Heretic.
This one's your reading.
$5 from Monkey at Typewriter. I just can't understand around an entity that both creates quasars and cares where my wiener goes. Unless my wiener is way more important than I think. Well, here's something to think about. What about the factory recall? God is infallible, but he gave us all a foreskin we have to cut off. Why?
Just the wrapping paper. And of course, I have it on good authority that every sperm is sacred. Every sperm is good.
Great.
Was that the last one? Okay, here we go.
Nope, we got more. All right, so we got 10 euros from God is an Atheist. Hi, universe does not expand into new space. Is it possible that the Planck length has been increasing since the beginning, and this explains the expansion of the universe? No need for dark energy. The Planck length is something from the fundamental constants of nature, so it's not something that can change, because otherwise then the constants of nature would change, and we've seen no evidence of any significant change to any of those constants. So probably won't be a great hypothesis to the best of my knowledge. However, great name.
And then we have 66.6 Norwegian kroner from Arsenic 1987. The most supernatural thing today is AI. Have you tested ChatGPT's voice feature? It's insane. Aron, hell is starting to freeze over here. Norway. By the way, favorite hotel I've ever been to is in hell, which is where the airport for Trondheim, Norway is not in Trondheim. It's in hell. So you have to drive out of Trondheim to drive to. You have to take the highway to hell, and then we go to this hotel, the Scandic Hell Hotel, and there's this beautiful little blonde girl. Of course, it's Norway. She hands you the key to your room, says "Welcome to hell" with a great big smile, and it's just always the way I thought hell would be.
Did they give you a handbasket?
No, that's when you go to hell in a handbasket.
Very well, very well. All right. Okay, so that is our collection of super chats and great calls. Aron, it was always a pleasure doing these things with you.
Well, thank you so much. I think we play well together.
All right. And the reason we can also play well is because we got a lot of support. So we have mods that deserve some thanks. So I got Kalissa and we got Monkey at Typewriter who've been doing the modding in the chat room. Screener was done, work was done by Stephanie. She came at the last minute and has made sure this worked well. And of course, Armageddon has been our producer to make sure that this show stays in place. I need to thank all of them. And looks like we got a couple more last minute. Armageddon, I apologize. Whatever money I was making from this tonight, it's going to you. Double it.
$10 from I'm a trader. I am e-trader. Okay, I'm e-trader. Okay, thanks you for the pronunciation. That's important. Could you discuss why it is constitutionally allowed for school vouchers to allow the teaching of religious doctrine with taxpayer dollars? It's not. But nobody's going to investigate that because the religious right owns and controls everything, and we're trying to wrest it out of their fiendish little hands.
When you're in power, any loss of power looks like persecution, and that card plays well.
Give me a
All right,
minute.
is that our last super chat?
Give me a minute. We might have missed one.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Da-na-na-na-na-na. Da-na-na-na-na. Na-na-na-na. We're waiting. Here we go.
All right. $5 from Mr. Barokia 10. I have more truck with Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism, given that I can find some good stuff without having to ascribe to a theology or pantheon.
Yeah, there's one quote of the Tao Te Ching that I don't know why, but I particularly love it. It says it is nature acts without intent, and so cannot be said to be benevolent nor malevolent to anything. I don't know why I find that so pleasant. I can see where Christians would be horrified at that. Just like when I react when Buddhists say that life is suffering, I deeply disagree. I understand the point that they're making. I just wouldn't phrase it that way.
All right. So that is it from us tonight. So audience, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for those awesome super chats. And we will catch you in the next go around. Again, Aron, thank you for having me take up half the screen with you.
We'll see you again.
All right. See all these names over here? These are supporters. You can be one of them too.